Welcome to December. This is a series where I review DC movies in December. I am very clever. This time, we're focusing on movies in the DCEU because those are fairly recent and fairly popular and are mostly really bad. If I'm still doing this in a year, I'll probably do some other DC movies, hopefully some better ones. So after a little less than a year, this has all come full circle. I started this channel with two video ideas in mind. Why the Joker and why the Village. And I've done a lot of other videos since then, and in a lot of those videos, I've talked a lot of crap about this movie in particular, mostly because I hate Batman vs. Superman. So I'm going to warn you here. I do not think that this movie is good at all. I think it could have been. I think that there is a cut of this 3-hour movie that could be alright. But widely, I hate this. So this review is going to be overwhelmingly negative. And I am sorry for that. Both for the Snyder stans that love this movie and for the other people who are either ambivalent or just hate this movie. Content warning. In this review, I'm going to be pretty angry. There's going to be some cursing. There's going to be some gay jokes. There's going to be some murder, some explosions and terrorist attacks. There's also going to be some superhero violence of the typical fashion. And there's also going to be a discussion of Batman vs. Superman. So, viewer discretion is advised. Okay, let's get this started. This review will spoil this movie, Man of Steel, which I've previously reviewed, so if you don't remember it, watch my other review, and probably some minor points about Justice League, which I'm going to review the Snyder Cut. There's probably going to be some other things. If you don't want to hear about it, I get that. Watch other stuff. I have plenty of other videos, a lot of which are better than this movie. I suggest the Crimson Peak review. That one's super popular. I think my Black Widow review is also really good. Check those out. We open on young Bruce at his parents' funeral. He runs off because Batman canonically is incapable of actually dealing with his grief. That's like his entire deal. He stumbles in the woods and falls through some kind of hole. He has a staring contest with some bats, but the bats totally cheat. They charge him and he has to cover his face, but they just fly around him and slowly raise him up into the air. And you know what's a lot of fun? Watching Batman's parents die again. Granted, it does this to establish, 1, why Bats is so fucking nuts, and 2, that his mother's name is Martha.
He was fighting a caped badass. Then we discovered his mom is named Martha, too.
Which is super important for later in the movie for a really dumb reason. So we watch the dad from Supernatural bite it, and then somehow the shooter's gun gets entangled in Bruce's mom's pearls, and her necklace is torn apart by the shot, which is just really fucking weird. It looks cinematic, but it just, like, why? The shooter doesn't even seem to, take their wallets or anything, which raises the question as to why the fuck he shot them, but whatever, maybe they hate billionaires. After this, we realize that this has all been a fucking dream sequence because God hates me and punishes me with stupid-ass dream sequences that don't go anywhere and aren't really necessary. And the reason that this happens is probably because I think that Cavill's Superman is a shitty messiah figure. We've seen Bat's parents die a fuck ton. There are so many versions of this. It's entirely unnecessary. Then we cut to the events of Man of Steel. Supes, played by Henry Cavill, is reprising his role from Man of Steel, and Zod, played by Michael Shannon, are fucking aggressively through the buildings. They did not use any loops, either for themselves or the buildings. Adult Bruce Wayne, played by Ben Affleck, is driving like a maniac through all of the 9/11 imagery, because I guess he thinks he can do something? I don't know. He manages to reach one of his employees and encourages everyone to get the fuck out, but the employee gets distracted by the fact that, aliens are attacking. Bruce, ever the master driver, navigates through Metropolis with ease until there are just too many cars in the way. Then he gets out and starts running. He watches the aggressive hugging between Superman and Zod and even manages to save some people, meaning at this point, Bats is more Jesus-like than Superman. Neat. 18 months later, some scuba divers managed to retrieve some kryptonite from the Indian Ocean at the behest of Lex Luthor, played by Jesse Eisenberg. Then we cut to some desert scene where Lois Lane, played by Amy Adams, reprises her role, doing the whole reporter thing. She's taken to some compound that has a dictator in it, and we introduce Jimmy Olsen, who I would tell you who he's played by, but the movie basically immediately kills him and it's not relevant, so ultimately it doesn't fucking matter who he was because the movie doesn't know how to do fan service correctly. Either show me some super boobies or actually use the characters effectively. Making Jimmy Olsen a CIA plant and killing him immediately is such a waste. Anyway, she's doing the interview thing, and Amy Adams actually is a pretty good Lois Lane, but she'd be better if the script wasn't fucking terrible. So, like, the dictator guy is betrayed by some mercenaries that he had hired, and he takes Lois hostage. Soups bursts in, coming from fucking nowhere. I guess he was super stalking her because even though he has a job that he, like, cares about, the only thing he does with this time is track down Lois. I don't know where he could have possibly come from, but whatever. The guy threatens Lois, but that's stupid, and Superman scolds him, and then gives him the hug that the dictator obviously never got from his parents. All of the guys who were doing the murder light the bodies on fire, and we later find out that they use magic bullets that somehow replicate Soups' heat vision. Some lady testifies that she was there and she watched Superman kill these guys.
Like the sky cracked open. He came down, then came fire.
So this spurns Senator June Finch, played by Holly Hunter, to start an investigation and an arraignment of Superman, which is really weird. She doesn't trust Superman because he has unlimited power and is answerable to no one, and just does stuff without asking or considering the consequences.
The world has been so caught up with what Superman can do that no one has asked what he should do.
Which, like, yeah, that's an excellent point, but it is handled infinitely better in Civil War, which barely dealt with that problem. I guess the goal is to sanction him, but I don't know how sanctions work on a single person, especially when said person can bench a fucking building. We cut back to Lois, who is pretty shaken by these events. She looks at her clothes, which are bloodied from the events, and finds her notebook that she was taking notes in, and it has one of the magic bullets impaled in it. She takes a bath, and Clark comes in and starts making goo-goo eyes at her. Weird. And they talk a bit about the role that he has as a hero and what he should do with his powers and what the implications of Senator Finch's questions about his power are. Because Senator Finch is still really aggressively gunning for him, but, I mean, she's hot, so, like, she could be after me too. And she gets extremely hot later in the movie. What do I have to do to get her attention? Murder some people with eye lasers? I can work on that. We'll add it to the time travel bit that I started with the beginning of the channel, but forgot about. Clark climbs into the tub fully clothed because he's a fucking sociopath. What the fuck? Water spills out all over the tub, and this would be infuriating to a rational person, but Lois seems to find it charming because everything he does is charming to her, I guess. After that, we catch up with Bruce and Alfred, who is played by Jeremy Irons, talking shop in the Batcave, which is neither a bat nor a cave. Alfred is upset because this version of Batman is edgy and does more violence, arguably, than other versions of the character. Bruce points out that they've always fundamentally been criminals, and they talk about Bruce's actual investigation and detective work to try and find the leader of a gang that he's after. That's actually pretty fucking cool. It's something that we don't get to see super often, so I'm hoping we get to see it in either Pattinson's version, or if we ever get a Batfleck movie, that'd be really fucking sweet. But this entire franchise is a disaster, so I doubt we'll ever get that in a Batfleck version, which is sad because I do like Ben Affleck as Batman. I think he does a pretty good job with what he is given. Also, this version of Alfred is an engineer, which is also really cool. This movie has potential. After that, we officially meet Jesse Eisenberg's Lex Luthor. People shit on him a lot for this role, but I don't really think that it's that bad. That's probably because he's the only person in this fucking movie who seems to be having fun. This is a comic book movie, and he's the only one who is hamming it up and completely over the top. It doesn't always work.
It's cherry. The red capes are coming. The red capes are coming. Devils don't come from hell beneath us. No, they come from the sky.
But I don't hate it. He's talking with the senator and says that he has a plan to make a weapon to take down Supes. He just needs a bit of help to import it. He's also helping with the rebuilding of Metropolis and the research into Kryptonian technology. Another person who is involved in the Super Sanction Committee is more amenable to Lex's requests and makes a deal with him. Lex is granted access to Zod's ship, which is still in the middle of Metropolis, and he also asks to have access to Zod's body and gets that too. Lex is so grateful that he feeds the man a Jolly Rancher, which is the weirdest product placement that I've seen probably ever. But maybe this is a JoJo's reference.
It's cherry.
Jotaro-kun.
Then we cut to one of the people that Bruce saved in the beginning of the movie, who lost his legs. He wheels up to the statue erected of Superman at the Kryptonian Attack Memorial and starts to scale it. He paints the words "False God" and is subsequently arrested. Then we get over to the Daily Planet with Lawrence Fishburne reprising his role as Perry White, who is also pretty good as Perry White. I like this version of Perry White. Perry demands that Clark do some sports coverage, but because sports are dumb, Clark is like, what about the bat branding? Apparently, the people he brands are murdered in prison. That's pretty sus. And Perry's like, bro, what? I saw bats doing tasks in electrical. He can't be the killer. Among Us references are still funny, right? Maybe not, but I'm also not funny. So, ha! Clark goes to interview some people and specifically seeks out the woman who is testifying against his alter ego to Congress or the Senate or whatever. But Dave's not here, man. I wonder how many people still get that reference. Like, I know the older generation will, but like, if any Gen Zs or millennials are watching, they may not get it. We meet up with Bruce Wayne, who is at an underground fighting ring, still collecting evidence for that case that he's working on. It's still really cool to see him do the actual legwork. He clones a dude's phone that will give him access to the information that leads to a ship that turns out to be Lex Luthor's property, as he illegally smuggled in that large chunk of kryptonite that we saw at the beginning of the movie, which is pretty neat. Clark insists that he should be able to write the story about the bat brandings, but Perry reaffirms that he's a fluff piece only reporter.
This bat vigilante has been consistently targeting the port and the adjacent projects and tenements, and as far as I can tell, the cops are actually helping him.
Crime wave in Gotham. Other breaking news. Water. Wet.
Because, widely, reporting is dead.
People don't buy papers, period, Kent.
Lois comes out and addresses Perry like, "Hey Daddy, can I borrow the car to go to DC? I want to check out this neat bullet." And because she has seniority and because the plot needs it to make the movie happen, Perry agrees. Lex meets up with Finch and she says that he's going to deny his right to import the kryptonite, which I want to talk about for a moment. In Man of Steel, just being around the stuff from Krypton in general weakened Supes to the point where he couldn't even stand.
I feel strange. Weak.
What's happening to him?
He's rejecting our ship's atmospherics.
Clark.
You've spent a lifetime adapting to Earth's ecology, but you never adapted to ours.
We didn't even need any of that sticky, icky green stuff. But in this movie, we changed that to just The Rock. It's one of those changes that I feel that was pushed onto Snyder by Warner Brothers. Snyder doesn't give a fuck about anything relating to these properties that he's adapting, or the characters that he's writing, or pacing, or having logical through lines, or natural dialogue. I don't like Zack Snyder. Anyway, Lex goes on a vaguely unhinged rant about his father and how devils actually come from above rather than below, because he doesn't trust Superman for some reason. Like, there are lots of reasons not to trust Superman, like the fact that he 9/11'd all of Metropolis with the help of Zod, or the fact that he never really explains any of his motivations, but we're never actually given a real reason why Lex distrusts Superman. We just kind of accept it because he's Lex Luthor and he doesn't like Superman in the comics, but that's not a good enough reason to do it here. Finch calls him out on his bullshit and says,
Take a bucket of piss and call it Granny's peach tea. Take a weapon of assassination and call it deterrence. You won't fool a fly or me.
which is a line that is more important than it would seem. With the information that Bruce acquired from that dude's phone, he plans to break into LexCorp and steal the rest of the information he needs, but it'll be hard because they actually have really good security. Alfred points out that while Batman would have a hard time doing this, Bruce Wayne was invited to a gala by Luthor, which simplifies matters. We get a cool background detail in the Batcave. There's a Robin outfit that has been spray painted with "Joke's on you, Batman." Like a true anarchist, the Joker does not use commas, and I find this infuriating. But this also implies that Jason Todd was killed by the Joker at some point, which is actually a really good Easter egg. It does kind of prove Maggie Mae Fish's point that Zack Snyder is just obsessed with death.
Somebody had to die. Somebody has to suffer.
So the only Easter egg that he does well is killing Jason Todd, presumably with a crowbar.
With this crowbar.
Bruce strolls up to the party like, "What up, I got a big cock." Which is probably true. I hope it's true. MatPat should do a cock examination like he did for Luigi. Cock examinations are tight. Anyway, Clark is also there because he's also supposed to do another fluff piece for the fundraiser. And he actually doesn't know who Bruce is. Some guy actually does have a pretty good joke.
Who's that? He must be new to the Let Them Eat Cake beat.
That's pretty good, because Bruce is a billionaire, and thus a bad person. Also, he's a murderer, which also makes him a bad person. He's bad squared. Bruce starts navigating his way down to the server room, and Clark also can hear that Bruce is getting directions from Alfred in his earpiece. There's also this raven-haired beauty, played by Gal Gadot, who also takes notice of Bruce. Bruce does get down to the server room, and when he's caught by Mercy, played by Tao Akamoto, he pretends to be drunk. He has to leave to let the server download finish, because apparently it's going to take some amount of time, so he goes back up to the party. Lex is giving this really awkward speech that is pretty uncomfortable and vaguely out of character, both for this version of the character as well as both the comic book version and the animated versions of the character. But whatever, we'll take it. He then introduces Bruce to Clark, because apparently he knows who both of them are, both of their secret identities.
Clark Kent, Daily Planet.
My foundation has already issued a statement in support of books.
Boys, Bruce Wayne meets Clark Kent. I love it. I love bringing people together. How are we?
Lex.
Hello. Good. Hi. Hello. Lex.
Which it would also be really nice if, someone explained how that worked as well. How he figured that out. Lex gives the second most on-the-nose dialogue that we get in the movie.
It is a pleasure. Ow! Wow, that is a good grip. You should not pick a fight with this person.
There's a fire in Mexico which draws Soups away, but after he's done rescuing everyone, the people crowd around him and start reaching for him, which creates this really neat-looking Renaissance painting-esque shot. He looks confused and uncomfortable with the experience, mostly because this is probably the only time that anyone not from the main cast has ever touched him. Also, that hot lady who noticed Bruce stole his hard drive. People also start questioning how Superman should be acting even more. We get several shots from the news and pundits asking what the fuck. Lex bails out that paraplegic who painted Soups' statue and gives him a plot device. I mean, he gives him a wheelchair. Definitely not a plot device. Lois corners General Not John Jones yet, played by Henry Lennox. She asks him about the super cool bullet, which I promise will eventually amount to something, which I've already spoiled. It's a plot to frame Superman. It just takes forever to build to anything because this movie is so long. We're only a third of the way through the plot so far, and my review has already gone on for approximately 1,000,000 years.
Somebody kill me, please!
General Not John Jones yet refuses to talk about the bullet. Bruce confronts the woman at a museum, and it turns out that she's an archaeology buff, mostly because she's really old and was there at the time of the creation of most of the archaeological finds. They bond and flirt a little bit over this, and she actually returns his hard drive, mostly because she doesn't have the decryption software necessary to break through the security that LexCorp installed on it. But Bruce Man does. We cut to another fucking dream sequence. Batman is in a desert and is wearing a coat over his cowl. He starts fighting against some Superman-themed Nazis and parademons for some reason, and then is captured. Soups busts down and spooks him awake by putting his hands on him and maybe making him a little bit hotter than Ben Affleck already was. But maybe he's not awake, actually, because a portal opens up just before him, and the Flash comes out and is like, "Hey dog, don't let Lois Lane die, because Superman is a fucking psychopath, and you were right the whole time." And now we confirm that Bruce is awake. Bats figures out that the white Portuguese that he thought was a gang leader that he's been searching for this entire movie is not a person, it's actually a ship. Also, Clark continues to investigate the fact that Batman is casually marking people for death, and he seems pretty uncomfortable with that, and everyone else seems powerless to do anything about it.
Inside they know. They know the mark all over. Guards don't care. That's the judge. One man decides who lives. How is that justice?
Some people even seem to support it, including the police. ACAB. All cops are bastards. Like, criminals deserve to live, unless they're like a direct threat to someone else's well-being. Lex gets his shipment and Batman decides to steal it. People shoot at him and he murders them. Or, at very least, manslaughters them. He runs them over, he shoots at them, he slams his car into them, he drags one fucking car for like a couple of miles behind him, flipping it end over end. Constantly. Batman murders people in this movie. This is an inarguable point. And that's not me condemning the movie. I don't really care if Batman murders people or not. I think it's more interesting to ask why he murders people in this movie. And really, the rule where he doesn't actually murder people comes from the constrictions that were put onto comic books in the 40s and 50s. The Silver Age of comics was controlled predominantly by the Comics Code, which was a bunch of censorship that people did on comic books because they felt that they were for children, whatever that means. And it's a mixed bag. It leads to a lot of the cool stuff about comic books. It leads to a lot of like creative problem solving in some ways, like Batman's ability to plan for things kind of comes out of this. It comes from a bunch of other places, but it also comes from the fact that he has to think laterally because he can't just kill people. But it also does lead to some very goofy moments, like the bat anti-shark spray, which granted, like, it's cute and kind of funny, but like also it's objectively stupid. So it's a mixed bag. So Batman's rule of not killing people really came out of this censorship, though, because it restricted what kind of forms of violence were really allowed, like punching and kicking were allowed, but like blood and gore and like murder wasn't. It also had a bunch of like other things. It's very similar to the Hays Code for film. So like queer coding of villains and such, which is an entire video that other people have done way better than I possibly could because they're smarter than I am. But yeah, so like it's one of the reasons why you couldn't have a character who was openly gay or too sexual. Granted, like people would ride that line very hard because, as with all forms of censorship, people bucked against it as much as they possibly could, and rightfully so. Anyway, all of that is an aside. I personally prefer when Batman is reticent to kill people. I think it raises the stakes a bit more because the villains are willing to straight up murder people. The fact that Batman doesn't actually makes him cooler to me, because this means that he's going out of his way in order to not sink to their level. And it's kind of the same thing that is in my Superman versus the Elite video, where it would be really easy for Batman. Batman's superhuman in several ways. I know that he technically doesn't have powers, but he managed to master like 18 martial arts and a bunch of stealth technology, and is a pretty smart engineer and the world's greatest detective, and he is at peak human condition. He can bench like 1,100 pounds and only needs 4 hours of sleep a night. So like he's peak human in comic book form. So he could kill people really easily. It wouldn't even be a question. If he wants the Joker dead, the Joker's dead. This is just what it is. The more superhuman villains, maybe he might have a slightly harder time with, but even then I doubt it, considering he takes on gods and monsters like Darkseid. I don't know. So like Batman not killing people I think is way cooler than him killing people, but this is the choice the movie has given us. It is an interesting question, and again, were this a better movie, I feel like we would deal with this in a more interesting way. And I'm not even saying that Zack Snyder couldn't have dealt with it. Zack Snyder might actually be the best director for this if it was just written in a different way. Maybe. Regardless. Soups comes in and fucking kicks the Batmobile like it's a toy. And this version of the Batmobile is this tankish one that's very similar to the one in The Dark Knight, which is also inarguably less cool than the 90s version. The 90s Batmobile is so cool. This tank thing, less cool. More practical, less cool. Probably more practical. I'd have to see its actual stats. Bats jumps out of the car and is like, "Do you menstruate?" And Soups is like, "What?" And then he just flies away, not wanting to deal with Batman's shit. And Bat says, "You will." Batman would support trans Superman. There's not a doubt in my mind. Batman would support trans Superman. It doesn't make any sense in this context, but I just kind of enjoy the thought of trans Superman. Lois meets up with General Not John Jones yet again. The General reveals that LexCorp is the manufacturer of that metal that the bullet is made from, and Lewis pieces together that Lex is trying to frame Superman. Also, that lady who is testifying against Superman reveals that she was lying and that she was paid by Luthor. Also, that trial starts. Soup shows up for it, which is cool for him because I still don't understand what the government is going to do against Superman. Like, I realize he's showing good faith. He's arriving. But what the fuck are they going to do? The paraplegic that Lex bailed out and gave the plot device wheelchair to is also there. So I'm sure that nothing is going to happen. Even though this is what the movie's kind of been building up to for like, oh God, so long. Finch is really laying into Soups, which is great. She could do that to me if she really wanted to. I would encourage it, in fact. Mercy is also at the trial, and I would also let her lay into me. In fact, I would definitely encourage that. Finch gets a bit flustered when she realized that there's a jar labeled Grandma's Peach Tea waiting for her, meaning that either Lex pissed in a jar or he had someone piss in a jar and deliver it. Either option of that is fucking hilarious. I do think that's an intentional joke that they're doing. I don't like it's obviously meant to be funny. It's also just like completely discordant with the scene that it's in. So just after that piss joke, the plot device wheelchair explodes, both making Finch and Mercy much hotter, if only briefly. Soups couldn't really do anything to stop this, and for some reason the media blames him, as though he would bomb it. I don't know. Their speculation only really gets worse after he kind of stops bringing out the dead and flies away, distraught at his own powerlessness to do anything against the wheelchair bomb, which again would be a really interesting question in a better movie. Unfortunately, we don't have a better movie. We have this movie, and we're only halfway through.
Somebody kill me, please! I'm on my knees! Pretty, pretty, please! Kill me! I want to die!
Bats, even more convinced of the ever-present threat of Superman, breaks into LexCorp and steals the kryptonite and leaves behind a batarang because he is a very subtle person who is in no way a dramatic bitch. Lex visits Zod's ship again and hacks into it because apparently it runs on Independence Day logic for some fucking reason.
Welcome.
He makes himself an admin.
Would you like to assume command?
Yes, I would. Yes, I would.
Very well. Let's begin.
Bruce trains really hard by abusing a giant tire, but the tire will have its revenge. It will kill. Also, Alfred helps Bruce design some weapons, like aerosolized kryptonite, and Bruce makes a kryptonite spear. He also checks in on some of Lex's other files. There's a meta folder that he looks at, even though that could have just been like a metadata folder probably. And there are 4 folders with custom logos in it. There's the one with the classic nested W's, one with the lightning bolt, one with the C and a dot in the middle of it, and one that looks like an A without the middle part. He looks through the first one and finds a picture of Wonder Woman from World War I, referencing the Wonder Woman sequel that's coming up. It also shows her at an ATM, but this raises a huge fucking problem. In between Wonder Woman, which takes place in about 1914, 1915, and this movie, which seems to be modern day 2016, because that's when the movie was made, Wonder Woman 1984 happens, where she saves the entire fucking world from a magic wish stone. Those events aren't referenced at all. But fine, you know, whatever. There's no way that they could have predicted entirely the plot of Wonder Woman 1984. So I'm not gonna hold that too hard against the movie. It's a plot hole, but it's a relatively minor one. Also, can we talk about how fucking hysterical it is that Lex has custom folders made for the metas? This means that one of two things happened. Either he designed those logos, or he went to one of his graphic design employees and had them do it. Either of which is fucking hilarious to me. Hey, I need you to do something for me.
Of course, Mr. Luthor. What do you have?
You know how there's Superman?
Oh yeah, of course.
Well, there are more people like that. And I found some of them. And I need you to design a couple of custom logos for them. So, like, this one has W's on her costume. Could you do something with that?
Sure, I guess, but what does W stand for?
Well, I mean, she's a woman, so, like, I imagine woman, probably? I don't know. But yeah, like, W's, that would be wonderful.
Wonderful. Wonder Woman.
Wonder Woman. Oh, I'm gonna trademark that immediately. Also, there's like this guy who is underwater and has a trident.
So like Poseidon? What about Poseidon Man, or Fish Guy, or Aqualad?
Ew, all of those are terrible. Wait, Aqualad? Well, he is like this really sexy, bearded guy, so Lad doesn't really feel right. He's got like a full beard, and he's shirtless, and he looks like Jason Momoa, like a man.
Aquaman? Aquafina?
Oh, that's good. You are good at this. I'm trademarking that too. And then there's also like this guy who is like part machine, like an android.
That translation was terrible, Mr. Luthor. They would actually be cyborgs.
Okay, well, let's call them cyborgs. I don't care.
Seems kinda lazy, doesn't it? Just cyborg?
Do you have a better idea?
No, not really. It's fine.
And then there's this other guy. He runs really fast and causes electricity to short out.
Also, he can disappear and reappear in like a flash? I could do a light bulb?
Lightning wraps around him, but I'm starting to like that flash thing. You don't think Adobe would mind if I trademarked that, right?
We could do something different, like Lightning Lad?
What is it with you and the word lad?
Well, I'm Scottish.
That's terrible. Stop it.
Stop being Scottish?
Yes. Have a Jolly Rancher. Take it. No, open your mouth. Lex dumps his body into the goopy stuff that's just leaking out of the ship for some reason, and he's gonna try to do some weird experiment. But the computer's like, hey dog, that's super taboo, and you probably shouldn't. But Lex counters,
screw the rules, I have money.
And the computer just accepts this, which made that entire fucking exchange really pointless. He also cuts himself and dumps some of his blood on the corpse, which is a less gross way of getting his DNA into Zod. But I would prefer to see Jesse Eisenberg fuck Michael Shannon. So, provided that Michael Shannon would be still alive in the movie. I don't want necrophilia. No. Lex also uses the mercenaries at the beginning of the movie to kidnap Lois. In between that, Clark has just taken a casual vacation and he climbs a mountain where he sees the ghost of Kevin Costner. You know, like we all do when we climb mountains. Kevin is reprising his role as the terrible version of Jonathan Kent that I hate for so many reasons. And he tells a really depressing story about that time that he killed a bunch of horses and celebrated by eating cake. You know, last time I implied that maybe this version of Jonathan Kent is a serial killer, and he did kill a bunch of animals when he was a kid and celebrated with cake. So, Lex also kidnaps Martha Kent. Bats also forwards the email to Wonder Woman, TM, and she watches the trailers for the upcoming DCEU projects. Lex brings Lois up to the top of a building and hams it up some more, because again, he's the only fucking person in this movie that's capable of having fun, apparently. After he gives his big villain speech, he just throws Lois off the side of a building, which, you know, okay. Soups comes out of nowhere and catches her and puts her back down on the ground. Then he goes up to confront Lex, pissed. But Lex points out that it's time for the title fight. Lex points out that the bat signal is on, and that apparently Gotham and Metropolis are right fucking across from each other for some reason. But it's time. It's time. Lex is the announcer for this fight. He says,
Fight night. The greatest gladiator match in the history of the world. God versus man. Day versus night. Son of Krypton versus Bat of Gotham.
I think that Bruce Campbell does a better wrestling announcer.
The sum of $3,000 will be paid to the terrifying, the deadly, the amazing Spider-Man!
But, you know, Lex does a serviceable job. I've seen worse. Soups isn't really having any of this. He doesn't really give a fuck about Batman right now, because Lex just tried to kill Lois, who's the only person other than Martha he seems to care about. But Lex casually brings up that there's like at least 45 more fucking minutes of this goddamn movie left. Soups, realizing the logic of this, decides to fly off, and we're finally at it, boys. We finally did it. Orphan Brawl 2016! Soups tries to flirt with Batsy a bit, but Batsy is too busy recreating The Dark Knight Returns to flirt back properly. He shoots Soups with some kryptonite gas and then kicks Soups around for a while. He has the upper hand and beats him up with pretty much everything available to him, which includes the kitchen sink. Well, okay, technically it's the bathroom sink, but, I mean, close enough. Finally, Bruce Man has Soups on the ropes and is literally pointing a spear at his throat. And we've reached the scene. The scene that has been mocked by everyone, probably the worst scene in the whole movie.
You're letting him kill Martha.
Why did you say that name?
Save Martha.
There are a lot of reasons to make fun of this scene. Firstly, I mean, the dialogue in this movie ranges from passable to clunky and awkward as hell, because Zack Snyder as a scriptwriter and director ranges from passable to clunky and awkward as hell, but I understand what this scene is supposed to be doing. The goal is to humanize Soups in Bats' eyes, and it's underlined by the fact that when he demands,
"Why did you say that name?"
Lois rushes in and explains it clunkily.
It's his mother's name!
And, like, on paper, I could see why people might think this would work, at least, you know, before you read it out loud. But the scene is just so stilted. Like, one, why does he say Martha? Like, anyone's natural reaction when their mom is in danger is not going to be to call them by their first name. I don't see that. Unless you have a very weird relationship, but Soups in these movies calls her mom. So he would say mom in this situation.
It can always be replaced.
But you can't be. Mom.
I also feel like if instead he said something like, he has my mom, or save my mom, Bats would hesitate, even still. Like, okay, fine. Bats has been fairly unreasonable for the entire film. And I understand that because he views Superman as this existential threat to the world. Which, I mean, demonstrably he is. Like, the events of Man of Steel prove this. And, like, this movie as a response to Man of Steel, it's a good idea, at least on paper. It's not good in practice, apparently, because I still feel like Bats has such a fixation on his mom, he has deified his parents in his mind so much that it would cause him to pause still and think about it and not kill Soups immediately. So we wouldn't have to have Lois come in and clunkily explain this. Like, I know that we need Lois later in the movie to be there for bad, dumb reasons that are dumb and I hate, but, like, it would still be infinitely more natural for Soups to just go save my mom instead of save Martha. Like, that's still, like, even that sounds weird and clunky. Save Martha? Martha's such a, I don't know, it's not a soft enough name for this to work in this situation. So I think, like, this entire scene sucks. But I could be wrong. Batman is a billionaire, and billionaires are only able to empathize with people who have basically the exact same problems that they do. So maybe Martha is truly necessary because Batman is a psychopath. So saying, save Martha, would really ground Clark in his mind, which I guess does have some form of logic to it. But again, the scene is still stilted and awkward, so this still doesn't really work at all. Especially because, like, afterwards, Bruce Man is just like,
What? Did we just become best friends? Yup!
Lois takes up the spear, but in the least cool way that she possibly could, and decides to throw it in a pool that's just in this building for some fucking reason. Bats goes off to take on the mercenaries that he just kind of immediately knows where they are. I mean, I guess he does have access to, like, Lex's entire fucking security system at this point, or whatever, all of his files, so sure, whatever. And we get what's probably the coolest scene in the movie. Batman just bursts up through the floor, and he fights not like a martial artist. He fights like a fucking brawler, and he just goes ham on these guys. He permanently injures all of them, possibly killing at least a few. And he saves Martha, which allows him to vicariously live his deepest desire. Which means now he could have a way cooler, deeper desire, like wanting to fuck Gal Gadot, or Henry Cavill, or Jesse Eisenberg, or all three. Much better desires. Lex, realizing that his toys didn't actually kill each other, goes to Plan B. He does some light electric play on Michael Shannon, which makes him much bigger and harder than ever. He is rock hard. In that, like, bones start sticking out from a lot of places, and he looks literally harder. Soups tries to stop this, but Soup sucks, so he couldn't. He manages to save Lex from the Frankensteinian monster. The military is like, oh shit, and starts trying to attack it. And much like in Avengers 1, they decide to fucking nuke it. Soups manages to redirect both Doomsday and the nuke into the outer atmosphere, but is temporarily knocked out by that. Unlike Doomsday, comic book fans already know what's happening here. Also, like, Justice League fans and, like, most people do. This movie had been doing The Dark Knight Returns, but is now doing Death of Superman. Two of the most overrated comic books in history. Doomsday can't die from, like, basically anything, and whenever anyone does manage to harm him, he just comes back stronger. He crashes down onto Earth. Because of the criticisms from people like me about the baffling amounts of collateral damage done so callously in Man of Steel, Bats decides to lead Doomsday away to an uninhabited part of Gothamtropolis.
Why did you bring him back to the city?
The port is abandoned. There's a weapon here that can kill it.
And I'm still mad about Gothamtropolis. Metropolis is supposed to be fairly close to Kansas, because that's where Smallville is, and like it's supposed to not be like a super incredible distance. Gotham is either Manhattan or all of New York, depending, so that's just really annoying to me. Soup stands for a moment, and now that his skin is on fleek, which I think is something that the kids still say, he goes down and decides to fight Doomsday. But Doomsday is really resistant to this kind of aggressive sex play, and he doesn't even notice that Batman is trying to help, mostly because Bats ran out of kryptonite weapons. Wonder Woman shows up. The movie acknowledges that she shouldn't fucking be here, but she's got a raging lady boner for Battle, and I have a raging boner for her. Probably not of the lady variety, so I'll allow it. She slashes up the Doom without the song. Batman widely just kind of dodges it the entire time because he's well outside of his weight class at this point. Lois realizes what's going on and somehow assumes that the kryptonite spear would help, despite having no way of knowing that Zod is the base of this thing, really. She goes back to retrieve the spear, but she's caught under a bunch of rubble because Soups realizes this and rescues her. He also retrieves the spear, but it weakens him considerably. He flies forward and spears Doomsday, and Doomsday pulls out that old Uno reverse card and spears him right through the chest, which is kind of a Jesus reference. And just to finish off this Jesus arc that we've been building up to since Man of Steel, they lie a dying Clark down, and we're all supposed to be very sad about the fact that he's definitely going to be in the next movie. We show two funerals, one for Soups in Metropolis where he gets a 21-gun salute, and one for Clark in Smallville. Bruce pays for the funeral, and we're very sad, maybe. Bats realizes that maybe killing the only guy who's able to tank damage like that was a bad plan, and he tells Diana that they're going to try and find the other metas. And Diana's like, but why though? And Bruce is like, because we have to catch up to Marvel. Dirt rises off of Clark's coffin, hinting at the fact that Soups is only
mostly dead. There's a big difference between mostly dead and all dead.
Then there's a mid-credit scene where we have a dramatic cello solo while Bats punches a wall, and also presumably changes his name to Kyle. And that's it. It's finally over. Thank Jesus, Superman, Christ. So this movie wants to be deep. It wants it so badly. It wants to thrust deep into your mind with its thick themes. And it tries so hard. It has a bunch of pretty Renaissance painting scenes. Lex waxes poetically about stuff and gives the pretenses of the film being deep.
That should be upside down. Now, we know better now, don't we? The devils don't come from hell beneath us, no. No, they come from the sky.
But the problem is that, much like Man of Steel, and Justice League to come, it's just too disjointed to really have good themes. There are some that it touches on, like how Superman is objectively fucking terrifying.
The world has been so caught up with what Superman can do that no one has asked what he should do.
Considering every time your hero saves a cat out of a tree, you read a puff piece editorial about an alien who, if he wanted to, could burn the whole place down. There wouldn't be a damn thing we could do to stop it.
Especially to the US government, which is so accustomed to being the biggest dick in the room. And by dick, I do mean the strongest, and being the most dickish. And another parallel is that Superman's interventions is a lot like the US's interventions, which have huge consequences for everyone, and no one can do anything about. There's an entire thing going on in Afghanistan because we decided not to do anything about the corruption that we caused. And Superman also has a bunch of unintended consequences in this. That's the most consistent theme of this movie. Superman fucked a lot of shit up because he wasn't careful enough in his fight with Zod. It's really a problem. So Snyder stands. Even Zack Snyder realizes that the collateral damage done by Superman in Man of Steel is a problem, because that's what this movie's about. Lex's dumb fucking plan is almost entirely possible due to just taking advantage of these two people's sloppiness. Supes didn't think anything through. Didn't think through saving Lois in the first part of the movie, which Lex predicted and used to his advantage so that he could frame Superman, causing the US government to push harder against him. Bats isn't careful and kills a bunch of people and gets a bunch of people killed. Batman brands people, and Lex pays other prisoners to kill the people that Batman has branded, causing strife between the apparently kind-hearted anti-capital punishment Clark and Batman. Supes blowing in and punching people allows Lex to frame him for murders in the Middle East, which causes the government to try and bring him down through legislation. Bruce is angry that Supes wasn't careful enough during his fight with Zod, allowing him to be easily manipulated by Lex. Lex's own hubris and allowing Bruce to do basically whatever he wanted leads both Batman to having a change of heart and teaming up with Diana. The government's willingness to trust Lex leads to Doomsday being created, a monster that no one can stop except for Superman, kind of. Lois throwing out that spear literally leads to Clark's death. Zack Snyder's unwillingness to consider pacing basically stopped the DCEU from getting off of the ground, and WB's studio interference also ruined these chances of these movies ever being good. This movie is Unintended Consequences, the movie, on like 5 levels.
It's done. Yes, Mr. Frodo. It's over now.
So, I don't like this movie. I think that there are a couple of things that work, but those are so few and far between that the overall product is garbage. I consider this to be one of the worst movies from a major studio in the last 20 years. It's fucking awful. And I acknowledge a lot of this is because I don't like Zack Snyder's films. Almost ever. Watchmen misses the point of the comic entirely. It's somehow a nearly one-for-one recreation, but because he doesn't bother to understand subtext, it ends up being callous and cold and obnoxious. Sucker Punch is pretty watchable. I mean, as far as Snyder films go, it's got some very problematic elements to it. 300 is pretty watchable, but it's also pretty corny in a lot of places, and it's also never really trying to be deep at all. But I think that the thing that Zack Snyder is worse at as a writer and a director is pacing. This movie is 3 hours long, and it feels so much longer. And I know that I'm watching the extended cut. The thing is, the theatrical edition doesn't feel much shorter. Both of these films feel like 5 hours long, and that's just too much. Man of Steel feels also way too long because every time we start going on a thread, the movie stops to do some bullshit. I have an entire review of why I think Man of Steel sucks, so if you haven't watched that, please do. I worked really hard on it, and I think it's pretty funny. And the next movie I'm going to review is the Snyder Cut, which is 4 hours long and doesn't need to be. There's a lot of flab in these movies that could be cut to make them better. And it's not even changing like major plot points. They just could be fucking trimmer and cleaner. There are also just a bunch of things that annoy me about this movie. Like, I still don't understand why Diana is in it. She has no reason to be in this fucking movie. Diana shouldn't really care about the fact that a photo of hers is out there. I mean, I guess a possible reason why she could care is because Lex apparently has the physical copy of the photo and she wants that for nostalgia reasons, which would explain like the framing device of Wonder Woman. But like, that doesn't explain her strategy for getting it. Like, she wants to steal Lex's files for what reason? Like, it just doesn't make sense. Like, she's in the movie for fan service reasons and fan service reasons alone, and it's not very good fan service. The secondary title fight with Doomsday is entertaining when she's fighting him, but like, it's just a CGI slugfest, honestly. And like, outside of that one smile, I don't feel like this is very Wonder Woman. And I want to point out, I love Wonder Woman. I want her to be in just about everything. When I have money, I buy stuff all the time with her logos. I have 3 action figures of her on my desk and a statue. I have posters over my bed with her. Pretty much everyone gets me Wonder Woman comics and Wonder Woman like notebooks and such for my birthday and Christmas. But that doesn't mean her involvement here is good. Like a lot of the rest of the movie, it's clunky and awkward and unnecessary. And Snyder's understanding of pacing is just piss poor. It's pretty bad in this, where there's just a lot of unneeded flab in the movie. This one's better than the Snyder Cut, but it's still a 3-hour movie that could probably be 2 hours easily, if not shorter. And also, not everything needs to be dark and edgy. And by dark, I mean both thematically and the color scheme of the movie. Everything is so desaturated, and it looks pretty fucking bad at a lot of the time. Anyway, this has been an unhinged rant. If you're into that kind of thing, and you made it this far, I appreciate it. I really do. If you think this was fun, share this video. Just go down to your graphic designer and design a custom logo for it, and then email it to the person that you're flirting with, kind of, but not really. And give the video a like. Comment down below about how I just don't get the movie, and how it's like totally #deep, and how Snyder is a visionary director who could do no wrong. Or suggest another movie or something. If you like superhero content, I have a lot of other videos about it. I reviewed Suicide Squad, I did Black Widow, or if you're into reading. I'm actually releasing chapters of a web novel for free where superheroes are dealing with the systems of power, kind of like how they do in this movie, but more focused on the down-on-the-street heroes that would have to interact with the police a lot more, and all of the trouble that comes with that, because again, ACAB, and it's a lot of fun. Smash Gal and Esfanir has a Superman-like character that deals with police violence, Black Lives Matter, and her own responsibility as a superhero. Kari is a really good character, I think, to explore these themes in a way that I guess Zack Snyder isn't willing to. It's also got a thief who is a bit like Batman in that like he uses technology in order to right the wrongs that he sees in the universe. Most of these wrongs are him stealing from billionaires and giving to people who can't afford stuff, but I also think that's really cool. If you really like my content, you can support me on Patreon. Supporting me on Patreon is tight. Maybe one day I could do this for a living. The YouTube algorithm also really doesn't like pushing my videos at all, which is sad because I spend a lot of time doing this. So if you're wondering when I'm uploading, you can follow me on Facebook and Twitter. I have pages on both of those. I'm kind of funny and I retweet a lot of funny stuff. And on the Facebook page, like, you'll get updates on all of my projects. So check me out there. Until next time, I've been Sean, your Wonder Woman simping movie reviewer, signing off. But maybe this is a JoJo's reference. Hey Daddy, can I borrow the car to go to DC? I want to check out this neat bullet. Lick, 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 lick. Also, can we talk about how fucking hysterical it is that Lex has custom folders made for the metas? This means that one of two things happened. Either he designed those logos, or he went to one of his graphic design employees and had them do it. Either of which is fucking hilarious to me. Hey, I need you to do something for me. So, you know how there's, like, Superman? My Lex is becoming a little bit more shaggy. Of course, Mr. Luthor. What do you have? You know how there's Superman? Yeah, of course. Well, there are more people like that. And I found some of them. And I need you to design a couple of custom logos for them. So, like, this one has W's on her costume. Could you do something with that? Sure, I guess. What do the W's stand for? Well, I mean, she's a woman, so, like, I imagine woman, probably? I don't know. But yeah, like, W's, that would be wonderful. Wonder Woman. Oh, I'm gonna trademark that immediately. Also, there's, like, this guy who is underwater and has a trident. So, like, Poseidon. What about Poseidon Man? Or Fish Guy? Or Aqualad? Ew. All of those are terrible. Wait, Aqualad? Well, he is like this really sexy, bearded guy, so lad doesn't really feel right. He's got like a full beard, and he's shirtless, and he looks like Jason Momoa, like a man. Maybe Aquaman? Oh, that's good. You're good at this. I'm trademarking that too. And then there's also like this guy who is like part machine, like an android. Well, he won't be an android. What? Dragon Ball Z taught me that those machine people were called androids. The translation was fucking terrible. They would actually be called cyborgs. Okay, well, let's call them cyborgs. I don't care. Seems quite lazy, don't it? Just cyborg? Do you have a better idea? No, not really. And then there's this other guy. He runs really fast and causes electricity to short out. Oh, so he could disappear and reappear in a flash. Flash? I don't think that's going to get like the wrong message across. Like maybe he's some kind of pervert. I mean, well, maybe, but to be fair, do you like these people? No, not really. I think that metas are the greatest threat to humanity. Well, then maybe employing one of them as a pervert is right up their alley. I could do like maybe a light bulb for that one. Lightning wraps around him, but I'm starting to like that flash thing. You don't think Adobe would mind if I trademarked that, right? Well, I mean, Flash is discontinued, so I think it should be fine. What about Lightning Lad? What is it with you and the word lad? Oh, well, I'm Scottish. That's terrible. Stop it. Stop being Scottish? Yes. Have a Jolly Rancher. Take it. No, open your mouth. Anyway,